Hey everyone! I wanted to do a pen and supplies test in my planner for next year, which is my A6 Hobonichi HON. In the last couple of years, there were some issues with the paper quality since the Tomoe River Paper ended up switching to the Sanzen ownership. So people specifically noticed issues with their pens and inks bleeding through the page, as well as blooming and feathering that wasn't present before. So I wanted to do some tests in my planner just to see how the paper holds up and how it performs with all of these different supplies. Please note that my results may vary from yours since every book is different. Now, I don't think I'll use all of these products in my planner next year. However, I just wanted to see how these products perform since they're either ones I will definitely use or are popular among the planning community, and just thought I'd include them. So hopefully this will provide a good enough example and cover a wide range of possible products that you may use in your planners too. So before we get started, I just want to run through all of the products that I will be testing in this video just so that you can get a better idea before we hop into everything. And if there is a product that you are curious about how it performs on this paper and I do not show it in this video, please leave a comment about it, and if I do have it, then I can certainly test it on my own time and then maybe just respond back to you in a comment or something like that. But starting off, we do have kind of a large variety of different gel pens just because I would say that that is perhaps my go-to type of pen to use in my planner over anything else. And so I did want to go ahead and just try several different types just to see how they compare with one another and see if anyone performs any better than the other. Starting off with, of course, my trusty and reliable Uniball One P gel pen. This is just in the P body, which is just supposed to be like the petite, shorter and like stubbier body. It's supposed to be more comfortable for writing, I guess, but this is my absolute favorite gel pen. This is the one that I swear by and use on a daily basis to fill everything out in my planner, basically. So we'll definitely be testing this one out first. The predecessor to my favorite Uniball 1P gel pen used to be this Uniball Signo DX. This was my very long time favorite gel pen for many years, up until pretty much like the beginning of this year. Then I finally discovered the Uniball 1P and fell in love with the ink. And then pretty closely after that, then for a long time, my other favorite would have been the Pilot G2 gel pen. This is in the 0.38mm size. I forgot to mention that the Uniball 1P is 0.38mm, and then the Uniball Signo here is 0.28mm. So if you're looking for a gel pen that is very thin and precise, then I highly recommend the Uniball Signo DX in the 0.28mm size. But this one here is the Pilot G2. Very comparable to the DX, just that this one is slightly bigger with the 0.38mm size. Here then we have a Zebra Sarasa. This is specifically part of the vintage collection, which is just one of my favorite like gel pen collections in terms of the colors, and the ink is just very smooth and writes very beautifully as well. I do have reviews of like a lot of these pens that I will go ahead and like either link them down below or something like that in case you're curious. But this is just a Zebra Sarasa Vintage. This one is also a 0.5mm size. And then next we have the Pilot Friction Y gel pen. I just chose kind of like the turquoise color, and this one is also in a 0.5mm size. I also want to test out the erasing ability with this, just because the Pilot Friction line, then they do come with this little eraser up top that you can erase your ink with if you end up making a mistake or something. So I definitely want to test that out as well. Next we have a Sakura Jelly Roll Moonlight, and this is supposed to work very nicely on light and dark paper, which is one of my favorite gel pens to use in situations like that. I think the 06 here is supposed to mean like it's 0.6mm in terms of like the font size. So yeah, we'll go ahead and test this one out. Similar to the Sakura Jelly Roll Moonlight, then we have the Pentel Matte Hop. I just chose the red color just to kind of contrast with the other stuff, but this one is also supposed to be really good for light and dark paper, and these currently only come in like the 0.1mm size, and so this one should be like pretty thick in terms of the font. I also want to test out this Uniball Signo white gel pen just because it is something that I always carry in my pencil case, and I not only like to like doodle with this on like dark paper and stuff, but I also like to use it when I make like a tiny little error while I'm like planning or writing stuff, and then I'll just take this and go over top of whatever mistake I made and then just like cover it up and then just go back and like write over it. So it's almost like a correction type of tool. The next item is pretty much the only like ballpoint pens that I have, and it's the Uniball Jetstream ballpoint pen. I believe it's supposed to be in the 0.5 millimeter size, but it's super thin. And this one is specifically the multi-pen that Hobonichi sells along with like some of their planners. And so this one was the one that came out for 2025, but I think I'll probably just test out the black and see how that performs. Unfortunately, I don't have any like roller ball pens. I haven't used those in a very long time, and so I don't have any in my collection. So if you are a fan of roller balls and if you have like a favorite, then go ahead and leave like suggestions down below, because I would be more than happy to give them a try and just see how they perform now that I'm older and have a little bit more experience with a lot more pens. Next, I wanted to go ahead and try out two different fountain pens. These are both TWSBI ECOs, but I wanted to go ahead and try one with the extra fine nib, which is this white one, and then the Amazonite one has the medium nib. So I kind of want to just see how that performs on the paper. They are inked up differently. The white TWSBI ECO here with the extra fine nib, this has the Atramentis Document Black ink inside, which I think would be like a pretty standard ink that maybe a lot of people would end up using in their Hobonichis, would just be like a black ink. And then I wanted to try a medium nib with a more interesting color inside of it, and so I decided to choose the Sailor Manyo Ayame color, I believe it's called. So it's kind of like a lighter, dusty, grayish green color. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that later, and I specifically wanted to do kind of like a more in-depth comparison with two different nib sizes and two different colors of the fountain pen ink, just because that's ultimately where a lot of the issues lied with the new Sanzen Tomoe River Paper these past couple of years, and so I definitely wanted to try out two different fountain pens for that. Sorry that this introduction is very long, but I kind of wanted to get this all out of the way before I actually like go into the swatch test, and hopefully just keep that very like straightforward and streamlined. But moving on, I do have one fine liner that I want to test out as well. I pretty much swear by the Sakura Pigma Micron fine liners. I don't have too many experiences using other fine liners, but I really love like pretty much all of the different sizes that these come in. I specifically chose the black shade in the 05 size just because I thought that that would be like a very perfect middle ground between the very thin like 003 sizes all the way up to I think like the 10 size or something like that. So I thought that this would be just a good middle ground to test. And then next we're going into a few markers and then like miscellaneous products over here. So starting with the markers, then I do have a Zebra Click Art marker. This is just one of the retractable markers that just has like a fine bullet tip at the end. This unfortunately is kind of notorious to not bleed through paper, but it definitely has the appearance like it could bleed through. So it's something that I've even noticed on thick 160 GSM paper with like my Archer and Olive journals, especially if I like color over the same area multiple times. So you may notice that I'm not testing out like any alcohol markers. I think it's pretty safe to say that it is maybe in your best interest not to use alcohol markers in planners like these, just because they will definitely bleed through. So I basically just stay away from them in my planners. Next, then we have a good old trusty Zebra mild liner. This is specifically like in the smoke red shade that came out in one of their new sets within the past year or so. So we'll go ahead and test out both the chisel tip and then the bullet nib over here. Next, then I also have a Kuretake Zig clean color dot marker. We'll go ahead and test the dot marker in a couple of different sizes and also kind of like this small 0.5 millimeter like point tip over here. And then of course we have to test out my favorite Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip. This is just in the black color. This is another one that I always have in my pen case with me at all times. It's one of my favorite things to use for headers, and so we'll of course be testing that. Very similarly to the Tombow Fudenosuke, then we'll be testing out a Pentel Fude Touch, which is just another like smaller brush pen, but I find that these are much juicier than the Tombow Fudenosuke's, and so I figured that we can go ahead and test that out just to kind of see how the different juicy ink performs on the paper. Next, then we have a Crayola Super Tip. I didn't find that I really used many of these like in my Sterling Ink Common Planner this past year, but it's just always something that I do like to have on hand, and because it is affordable, then I thought that it would be a nice thing to try just because it is quite popular in the planner community. And then of course we have to test out a Tombow dual brush pen. I just chose the 679 color, which is kind of like this deep plum shade, so we'll of course test out the brush pen and then the bullet nib over here. And then similarly to the Tombow, then I have a Sailor Shikiori dual-ended brush pen here. It has the brush end on one side and then a very fine kind of like plastic nib on the other side. So we'll test that out as well. And then moving on to kind of like the miscellaneous items, then I do have a couple of like pencils here. The first one being like the mechanical pencil that I have in my pencil case at all times. This is what I like to use when I'm kind of like sketching out different layouts or sketching out like my daily doodles. So this is just in a 0.5mm size. This is the Tombow Monograph Shaker mechanical pencil. And then we'll be testing out a Prismacolor colored pencil. I don't use too many colored pencils in my planners, but in case you are the type of person that likes to use it for like decorating or habit tracking and stuff, then I thought that it would be a good thing to try out. And then moving on to a couple of stamps, I will be using this stamp pad. I believe I got it from Michael's a very long time ago, but it's just a basic black dye ink. So we'll go ahead and test it out with some of my letter stamps over here. I have a couple of more stamps that I would like to use. These two I keep in my pencil bag at all times as well. I can never remember the name of this, but I will definitely have it down below in the description in case you're curious. I got it off of JetPens. It's very cute and adorable, but it's kind of like the like keyboard stamps that you can like just pop out and then like stamp it onto the page, and it's just this panda version with a bunch of different expressions, which is one of my favorites, and I love using it in my planner. And then I also want to test out, I know it's very dirty, it looks kind of disgusting. It has my like kneaded eraser kind of like stuck all over it, just because it's in the same pocket as it, but the inside still works just fine, so that's what really matters. This is one of the Pilot Friction stamps, and this is specifically kind of like the play button, and this is what I like to use in my monthly calendars when I am scheduling like my YouTube videos and stuff. So I definitely want to try this out and see how it works. I may or may not try erasing it once it dries. I haven't had really good luck with that in the past, but I guess we'll see. And then the last two items, this might sound like a little silly, but this is the correction tape that I have with me in my pencil bag. This is just one of the big whiteout correction tapes. Nothing special, but it is what I like to use when I like really mess something up in my planner and just need to cover up like a larger area. I just want to see how this like blends into the paper. And then finally, I'll just use my Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor paints and just do like a couple of swatches on the paper as well, just to see how the watercolor performs. I'll just take my tiny little Pentel Aquash water brush to apply that onto the paper. And then this was something that I remembered a little bit later that I originally wanted to include in this video, but because sometimes I do like to swatch out my inks using the end of this glass dip pen, then I decided that I would try swatching out one of these inks. This is just the Robert Oster and the Coffee Monsters Co. Coffee Monster brown ink color. And then I also took the Pilot Ero Tsushi dip pen in the medium nib size and just wrote out the name with that as well, just to see how that performed as well. So as you saw from the swatch test, then basically what I did was just took the pen or marker of choice and basically just like colored in the first 3 boxes and then drew out a few loops at the end and then immediately ran my finger over it just to create like that smear test to see like how easily they smear. But now that all of these swatches are done, let's go ahead and first flip over the page to see if there's any bleed through. Alright, so as you can see, there is no bleed through on the page behind it, which is perfect. That is exactly what we want. As to be expected with the thin Tomoe River paper, then there is certainly going to be ghosting. So you can definitely see that the majority of the materials are ghosting through the page. And that just means that you can basically like see the writing on the back side of the page. Just to show you a bit closer, you can definitely feel the texture of some of these markers more than others, specifically like the ballpoint pen and like the gel pens up here. I think anything with kind of like more of that fine tip or fine nib, I feel like will leave more of an imprint in the page, and that way you can feel the texture on the back side of the page. I don't notice it very much with the TWSBI ECO extra fine nib, which is great. Fortunately, that the markers really don't leave much of an imprint at all, even with kind of like the finer ends like the Sailor Shikiori or like the Kiritake Zig clean color. I don't really feel them that much, not much compared to the gel pens and ballpoint pen up here, which is really good. I do notice with the Kiritake clean color dot marker, it looks like it's just on the verge of bleeding through, but it is not. It's just a little bit more concentrated with the ink in like the center parts of these circles. I'm quite surprised with how the Zebra Click art marker performed. Like I mentioned earlier, it is prone to kind of like give the appearance of it almost bleeding through even on thick 160 GSM paper from Archer & Olive, so I was very pleased to see that it doesn't seem to have that same effect on this paper, which is really good. Now moving on to the stamps down here and kind of like the last minute like ink swatches that I did, you will see that there is a little bit of wrinkling, specifically when you do like watercolors or when you swatch a large section for ink, then there will be kind of like this wrinkling of the paper. So it'll definitely create some texture, something that you may want to just keep in mind if you are not a fan of that. And in terms of the stamps, I feel like the Pilot Friction stamp holds up pretty well. It's not very noticeable. It's just about the same amount of ghosting as like the pens and markers up here. However, I was kind of expecting the stamps to be a little bit more problemsome, I guess. I'd say that this Panda stamp is probably the material that appears to be most likely to bleed through the page. Compared to everything that I've tested today, I feel like this is probably the one that you are able to see the most of. But the good news is that it is not bleeding through at all. It's just ghosting a lot more than anything else. And you can also see that to be true with the black ink pad from Michaels. So if stamping is something that you enjoy doing in your planners, then this is something that you may want to just keep in mind, that depending on what ink you use, then it could be a little bit more prone to ghosting and possibly bleed through. Yeah, I'd say as far as kind of like the ghosting and bleed through test of the paper, which was probably like my largest concern with everything, I'd say that everything performed pretty well. Nothing really surprised me, at least in a bad way. If anything, I was just pleasantly surprised at how well everything did perform. So I think that that is definitely a good takeaway. Let's go ahead and look for any possible like feathering, specifically with more of like the wet inks or like inkier pens and markers. Alright, so taking a look at the fountain pens here, specifically like the TWSBI ones that I did here, to me they look perfectly fine. I don't notice any feathering at all, and in case you're wondering what feathering is, it's basically like when the ink on the page appears to kind of be like blooming and creating like that veining appearance in like the texture of the paper, to where it eventually ends up kind of looking fuzzy. So that's definitely something that we don't want. We want our inks and materials to just look crisp and exactly the way that we applied them onto the page. So from what I can tell, I think that everything performed very well. I don't notice any of that feathering or blooming type of property with any of the inks, which is great. So that's with like the TWSBI fountain pens, and then also with like the Kuretake Zig, just because you're like pressing onto that circular sponge tip and applying a lot of concentrated ink in one area. I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was not blooming out of these circles. Same with the Pentel Fude Touch Brush pen. Like I mentioned, that one does tend to be a lot inkier when you apply it, so it's really good to see that that one stayed perfectly fine. And then in terms of the watercolor and fountain pen swatch, then I thought that they performed very well. Again, just no like feathering or blooming of either of the inks, and also no bleed through, which is perfect. I'm not sure how well you can see, but there is a little bit of like a sheening property to this ink. It just kind of has almost like a black sheen like over in this section here, so that's one of the great things about the Tomoe River paper, is that it really brings out the different and interesting properties of inks, so that is very nice to see. And then in terms of like the smear test that I did with everything, I think that went about as well as I could have hoped. I think a lot of them really did perform pretty well. There wasn't like a terrible amount of smearing, aside from, I'd say, like those very juicy gel pens like the Sakura Jelly Roll Moonlight, as well as the Pentel Matte Hop. I'd say that those are probably safe to assume that they will take a little bit longer to dry than like the gel pens up here. For the fountain pen inks, I'm not surprised that they smeared terribly, just because they are very watery at first, and so you definitely want to give them enough time to dry, or use like blotter paper in between your pages so that it doesn't like smear onto the other page. And then in terms of the big correction tape, it is a little bit kind of like a shiny texture, but it's not too terrible in my opinion. I feel like it just kind of blends into the page fine for what I would expect from it. I don't need it to be like perfect or anything, so I feel like it would work just fine on this paper, but as you can see, like in different lighting, you can certainly tell that it's on there, but I think if you just need it to cover up something like in a pinch, then it should work perfectly fine. And then also to go back to these Pilot Friction products, the erasable ones, as you can see, I did try to erase the Pilot Friction Y here in the center. It didn't perform as perfectly as I would have hoped. I also tried erasing a little bit down here with the stamp. It's not perfect by any means, and I feel like it does really indent the paper quite a bit. So in my personal opinion, I probably won't really utilize like the erasing capability of these pens as well as the stamp. I think if I end up messing it up, then it just is what it is, or I'll try and like cover it up and redo it, but I don't think that erasing it will make it look perfect by any means. And then it also just really indents the paper, and then it kind of just creates kind of like an intense texture like on the other side. So personally for me, I don't see myself really using it, but if these erasable products pique your interest, then hopefully this will provide enough context to allow you to make that decision going forward. But yeah, I think that is pretty much it for the swatch test today. I really hope that you found it helpful and enjoyable. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, if there is something else that you wanted me to test out but I did not feature in this video, please leave a comment, and if I happen to have that item already, I'll go ahead and test it out down here, and I'll just give you an update replying back to your comment on it. But yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any future video suggestions, then please let me know as well. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.